New York City. The city that never sleeps. The city of dreams and opportunity, right? Today, New York feels like it's slipping away. The reality of New York's housing market has turned that promise into a faint echo, drowned out by relentless rent hikes and luxury towers rising on every block. Affordable apartments are vanishing, and longtime residents, families who've called these streets home for generations, are being priced out, forced to the edges of the city, or even out of it altogether. The housing crisis in major cities across the globe has become a focal point of social, economic, and political debate. While New York City grapples with sky-high rents, gentrification, and an ongoing shortage of affordable housing, Berlin has managed to maintain a more affordable and accessible housing market for its residents. If I asked you why, the first answer that comes to mind would be, New York has way more people than Berlin, which is true. But what if I told you it's deeper than that and it goes all the way back to
The Diary of Money?
Housing policy in both Berlin and New York City has been shaped by their respective histories, leading to very different approaches to affordability and availability. Berlin's housing policy was largely influenced by its post-World War II reconstruction and the city's unique position during the Cold War. With large swaths of the city destroyed by bombing and the population divided between East and West, housing became a crucial element of post-war planning. After the war, Germany was divided between the Allied forces and the Soviet Union. West Berlin, controlled by the Allies, relied on heavy government investment in housing as the city struggled to attract residents and keep the economy stable. This led to an extensive stock of government-subsidized housing programs. On the other side of the wall, East Berlin's housing policy operated under socialist principles. The East German government pursued a state-controlled housing system, constructing vast housing blocks with prefabricated designs to accommodate as many people as possible at low costs. Known as Plattenbau, these apartment blocks were designed to maximize efficiency and uniformity, and became a prominent feature of the East Berlin landscape. Housing was regarded as an essential focus for citizens, and the government controlled rent and allocation, resulting in largely affordable accommodations for residents. Even after the Berlin Wall fell in 1989 and reunification in 1990, Berlin continued to invest in social housing, fostering a culture that views housing as a right rather than a commodity. In contrast, New York's housing landscape evolved under very different pressures. As one of the oldest and most densely populated cities in the United States, New York saw rapid urbanization and real estate speculation as early as the late 19th century. Following World War II, New York experienced waves of suburbanization, gentrification, and real estate development, often prioritizing private market solutions over public housing. Rent control and rent stabilization programs did emerge, but these were limited in scope, covering only certain units and with restrictions that led to a gradual decline in the number of rent-regulated apartments. The result was a housing market that increasingly favored private development, often at the expense of affordability for average New Yorkers. So let's talk policy. A critical factor in Berlin's success with affordable housing is the high level of public and cooperative ownership of residential properties. Approximately 20% of Berlin's housing stock is publicly owned, managed by government-backed entities that prioritize affordable rents and long-term tenancy over profit. Additionally, housing cooperatives play a significant role in Berlin's housing landscape. In a cooperative, tenants are members who collectively own the property, and rents are set based on the cost of maintaining the building, rather than market rates. This system helps stabilize rent levels and reduces the profit-driven pressures that drive up housing costs in fully privatized markets. In contrast, New York's housing market is dominated by private ownership. Public housing is limited, with only around 8% of the city's housing stock managed by the New York City Housing Authority. The NYCHA has faced chronic underfunding and mismanagement issues, leading to deteriorating conditions in many of its buildings. The private rental market in New York is heavily influenced by real estate developers and investors, who prioritize profit and often push for high-end developments that appeal to wealthier tenants. Gentrification and luxury developments have priced out many low- and middle-income residents, creating an affordability crisis that Berlin's public and cooperative housing models have largely helped to avoid.
More New Yorkers arrive every day. Because if we do not deal with this housing crisis, New York will no longer be a city for working people, for families, for immigrants, or for elders. We cannot let this happen. We must take action now. This crisis has been decades in the making, but the reality is here now. Our city declared a housing emergency 5 decades ago, yet we have failed to address it with the same urgency we would any other crisis.
Wait, what? Imagine a place calling something a crisis and not addressing the crisis adequately in 50 years. This seems absurd, but not surprising. It speaks to the leadership in New York over the years. Meanwhile, in Berlin, the German capital has strict regulations that limit how much landlords can raise rents, even between tenants. For example, a law enacted in 2015, called the Mietpreisbremse, or rent brake, capped rent increases to 10% above the local average for similar properties in high-demand areas. Additionally, Berlin's government recently attempted to impose a rent freeze, which, although ultimately struck down by Germany's constitutional court, highlighted the city's commitment to regulating housing costs. But this difference in approach isn't just about policy, it's cultural. Berlin treats housing as a social good, something to be protected. New York, on the other hand, sees it as a goldmine. Real estate in New York is not just housing, it's an industry, a massive money-making machine. Landlords, developers, and investors hold immense power. A place for people to live, sure, but also an investment, an opportunity for profit. And when housing becomes a commodity, the people who most need stability are often the ones who lose out. Berlin is proof that a different way is possible. By prioritizing the well-being of residents over the profit of developers, Berlin has created a housing model that protects the community and resists the worst of real estate speculation. It's a model that challenges us to rethink the purpose of housing. Should housing be just another product for sale, or is it something more? A foundation of stability, of opportunity, of life itself.